You know, usually when we talk about taking a break, there's this kind of universal unspoken expectation of what that actually looks like.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Like you work incredibly hard, you get completely exhausted, and then you just stop.
Yeah, you just collapse.
Exactly. You collapse on the couch, maybe put on some random show in the background, and you do absolutely nothing. And we treat that empty space as like the ultimate reward.
We really do. We view rest as a complete void. I
Mhm.
mean, the societal default basically assumes that energy is like water in a bucket.
Okay.
You pour it out during the day, and then to refill it, you just have to leave the bucket alone under a slow drip.
But what if doing nothing is actually a trap? I mean, what if everything you've been taught about taking a break, about just, switching off and becoming motionless, is secretly the exact thing making you feel more drained?
It's a profound paradox to confront, really.
It is, like making you more sluggish and more tired.
Right, because we chase this emptiness thinking it's going to somehow magically refill us.
Hmm.
But instead, the absence of activity often just depletes our energy reserves even further.
And that paradox, that's really the engine for our deep dive today. We're looking at a truly fascinating stack of sources that fundamentally tear down and rebuild this whole concept of rest.
Some really wild material.
It is, and what's so wild is where these insights actually come from. We're diving into translated excerpts from an Indian publication called Akan Jyoti.
Yes, specifically looking at texts dating all the way back to June 1964 and October 1971.
Right, so we're pairing those mid-century writings with modern neuroscientific case studies, and we're looking at how this applies to aging, specifically that big milestone around age 58.
Which is when a lot of people are approaching or entering retirement.
Exactly, because society usually treats hitting 58 like a finish line, where the implicit message is just, congratulations, you finally get to do nothing forever.
But the Akan Jyoti texts argue that this desire to do nothing is a highly dangerous myth.
Yeah, they do not hold back.
No, they don't. And to really grasp the danger, the sources deploy this very stark biological metaphor. They ask you to visualize two contrasting bodies of water.
Oh, the pond and the river.
Yes, a stagnant pond covered in a thick layer of green moss versus a vibrant, rushing river.
That stagnant pond visual really stuck with me, I have to say.
It's visceral, right?
It really is. You can just picture that thick, undisturbed water sitting there, gathering scum, just becoming totally opaque. It feels heavy.
Extremely heavy.
And the text warns us that post-58, when many people assume it's time to finally, lie back and stare at the ceiling, they're unknowingly turning themselves into that pond.
Yeah, we label this behavior taking it easy or enjoying our golden years.
Right.
But the text is relentless here. It calls this out not as rest, but as masked laziness.
And laziness here isn't like a moral judgment, is it?
No, it's a biological hazard. Just as stagnant water rots and becomes a breeding ground for toxic bacteria, a stagnant body becomes, well, in the text's exact words, a home for diseases.
Wow.
Yeah. The total cessation of work isn't a hard-earned reward. It's a complete system shutdown. It's basically an open invitation to physical and mental decay.
Which is terrifying, honestly.
It is. And from a modern physiological standpoint, this maps perfectly onto what we know about cellular senescence and muscle atrophy.
Like if you don't use it, you lose it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you stop demanding output from your body, your cells literally begin to downregulate their energy production.
It really reminds me of how a car battery operates.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. Like
Yeah.
if you buy a brand new car, you park it in a garage and just leave it there for 6 months without ever turning the key.
You're not saving the battery.
No, you're killing it. The battery will be completely dead when you finally try to start it. The machine actually needs to be turned on. The engine needs to run so the alternator can spin and actively hold the charge.
That's a great way to look at it. Our bodies seem to operate on the exact same principle. We have to be used to generate our own life force. The human body is essentially an energy-producing factory that only manufactures supply when there's active demand.
So if there's no demand.
Then your mitochondria, the powerhouses of your cells, they stop multiplying. They become more efficient when you stress them. But when you remove all stress,
When you become the pond.
exactly, when you become the pond, your body interprets that as a signal to dismantle the factory.
Okay, I get that on a macro level, but let's be realistic here for a second.
Sure.
The body does have a finite amount of energy on any given day.
Absolutely.
If you are 58 or 65, you can't just keep running the engine at redline from dawn until dusk. At some point, the fuel burns out. So how do we keep the engine running without just driving ourselves into total burnout?
That tension, between staying active and avoiding burnout. That is exactly where the June 1964 issue of Akan Jyoti introduces this radical redefinition of fatigue.
This was the part that blew my mind.
Yeah. The official wisdom from the text states, and this is a quote, "Rest does not mean the abandonment of work, but the change of work."
The change of work. I mean, that line is just incredible.
It changes everything.
It really does. The idea isn't to stop entirely. The idea is just to switch tracks.
Right. The 1964 text argues that the exhaustion you feel at the end of a hard task almost never affects the entire body all at once.
But we always act like it does, don't we?
All the time.
Yeah.
We have this habit of sighing heavily and saying, "Oh, I am exhausted," as if every single cell in our being has been drained of life.
Yeah, like my pinky toe is just as tired as my brain.
Exactly. But the reality is that fatigue is highly localized. It impacts very specific neural pathways or specific muscle groups while leaving the rest of the organism completely untouched.
So, okay, if I've been sitting at a desk staring at a really complex spreadsheet for 4 uninterrupted hours.
Your legs aren't tired.
Right, my legs aren't tired, my arms aren't tired, even my entire brain isn't tired, is it?
No, it's not. Just the very specific neural pathways in your visual cortex and like the parts of your prefrontal cortex handling intense data processing, those are fried.
But the rest of the system is fine.
The rest of your system is just sitting there, completely fine. In fact, it might actually be craving stimulation.
Really? Like it's bored.
Yeah, from a neurological perspective, when you focus intensely on that spreadsheet, you're depleting specific neurotransmitters.
Like, dopamine.
Dopamine, acetylcholine, yeah. You're depleting them in a very concentrated cluster of synapses.
Right.
When those local reserves run low, your brain sends out a generalized feeling of fatigue to get you to stop.
Oh, wow.
But you haven't depleted your overall life force.
Yeah.
You've just emptied one specific drawer in the cabinet.
You know what this sounds like? It sounds exactly like crop rotation in farming.
Oh, yeah, that's a perfect parallel.
Right. Because if you plant the exact same crop, let's say corn, in the same field year after year after year, that corn stalks sucks very specific nutrients like nitrogen out of the dirt.
And eventually the soil is totally destroyed.
Exactly. Nothing will grow. And the old school method was to just leave the field empty for a year to rest. But modern farmers know that if you plant a different crop the next season, like soybeans, the soybeans actually pull nitrogen from the air and put it back into the dirt.
They restore it.
Yeah. The soil isn't resting by doing nothing. It's actively restoring itself by doing something different.
And that maps so beautifully onto the human nervous system.
It really does.
Shifting from manual labor to mental work, or moving from highly focused analytical tasks to broad creative expression, it automatically begins to recharge the body.
So it isn't merely pausing the energy drain.
No, it is an active accumulation process. The soybeans of a creative hobby are literally putting neurotransmitters back into the system while the corn pathways recover.
What makes this so striking is reading this in a text from 1964.
It's wild, isn't it?
It's mind-blowing. Decades before functional MRI machines existed to let scientists watch specific brain regions light up and dim down, these writers had identified that rest is about shifting the load to a new region, not dropping the load entirely.
They were way ahead of their time.
But, knowing we need to rotate our activities is one thing. Actually doing it when you feel dead tired is another.
That's the hard part.
Right. And that's why I found the text's depiction of Master Dinanath so practical.
Oh, yes, Master Dinanath.
He serves as this archetype in the source material for how to actually live out this philosophy of active rest in a single day.
The Master Dinanath case study really moves the theory into immediate, actionable practice. The text describes him spending hours doing heavy, physically exhausting gardening.
So he's sweating, muscles are taxed.
Yeah, he's physically drained. And the old model of the stagnant pond dictates that his next move must be to go inside, collapse in an armchair, and do nothing for the rest of the evening.
But he bypasses the armchair entirely.
He does.
Instead of collapsing, he cleans up and immediately picks up a book to read. And the text makes a point to note that he looks completely refreshed while doing so.
Because he shifted the load.
Right. He shifted the load from his physical muscular system to his cognitive system. The body gets to rest and repair its micro-tears while the mind takes over the heavy lifting.
And then later in the day, after reading and deeply engaging his mind for several hours, he doesn't just sit there until cognitive fatigue sets in and he gets groggy.
What does he do next?
He closes the book and goes for a brisk walk. He shifts the load back to the physical.
It's constant motion.
Yeah, and after the walk, he stops to meditate. Through this constant, deliberate task switching, his internal energy capacity is continuously resetting.
And to make this even more accessible for us, the text provides some highly specific formulas based on this Dinanath principle.
These are great.
The first one is straightforward. If your body is tired, listen to music, which makes total sense when we think about localized fatigue.
Definitely.
Because music engages the auditory cortex and the emotional centers of the brain, providing rich stimulation without requiring a single ounce of physical output from the motor cortex.
Exactly. But the second formula is where the text gets incredibly profound.
Oh, yeah.
It states, if your mind is tired, engage in service to others.
Okay, I really want to unpack that one. If your mind is tired, engage in service. Because my instinct, and I think the instinct of most people listening to this right now, is the exact opposite.
Oh, absolutely.
When my mind is exhausted from a long day of problem solving or, dealing with stress, I usually feel this intense need to just isolate.
You want to retreat.
I want to be alone, close the door, and hide from the world. Why does the text argue that helping someone else is the cure for mental fatigue?
Well, we have to look at what is actually causing that mental fatigue in the first place.
Okay.
Most of the time, our minds aren't just tired from doing math, right? They're exhausted by rumination, anxiety, and overthinking our own personal problems.
Just spinning our wheels.
Exactly. And in neuroscience, this self-referential thinking is governed by what's called the default mode network.
The default mode network.
Yeah. When we're stressed, this network traps us in intense, ego-driven, anxious loops. Engaging in service, whether that's helping a neighbor fix a fence, volunteering at a community center, or just doing a physical favor for a friend, forces your brain to shift its focus entirely outward.
So you are literally starving that anxious part of your brain of the energy it needs to keep spinning.
Yes. You are downregulating the default mode network and activating the empathy and social bonding circuits of the brain.
That is fascinating.
And when you help someone, your brain actually releases oxytocin and reduces cortisol, the stress hormone. So it provides profound neurological relief because it breaks the loop of self-obsession that was causing the exhaustion.
Wow. So the overarching rule of the Master Dyna framework becomes very clear. Don't stop, just change direction.
Just change direction.
Bring variety into your daily routine to stay meaningful and active. Total cessation is the stagnant pond. Changing direction is the flowing river.
It creates a life of continuous momentum.
It sounds fantastic in theory, but, and let's be real for a second. Anyone who has ever come home exhausted from a grueling day knows that switching tasks, choosing to engage rather than check out, requires a massive amount of willpower.
It does.
When you are feeling completely drained, the idea of picking up a heavy nonfiction book instead of mindlessly scrolling on your phone feels impossible.
It really does feel impossible in the moment.
So if we're trying to avoid fatigue, how do we not just default to laziness? I mean, how are we supposed to enforce this kind of rigorous discipline every single day, especially as we age into our 60s and beyond?
Well, the authors of the source material, they actually anticipate that exact vulnerability in human nature.
Really?
Yeah. You're concerned about the sheer exhaustion of willpower leads to the final and arguably most crucial instruction in the 1971 text.
Okay.
It involves a strict directive about the very language and psychology we use to approach our daily routines. The text explicitly tells us to discard the concept of anushasan.
Alushasan, which translates to discipline, right?
Yes, discipline. And to understand how radical this is, we have to recognize the cultural weight of that word.
Okay, lay it out for us.
In traditional Indian philosophy and many Eastern texts, strict ascetic discipline, forcing the mind and body to endure hardship through sheer willpower, often referred to as tapasya, is revered as the ultimate virtue.
Right, it's glorified.
Highly glorified. But this 1971 text pivots away from thousands of years of tradition. It argues that relying on anushasan is a trap.
A trap.
Yeah, instead, it insists we must replace the word discipline with the word system, or vyavastha.
We have to build a system rather than rely on discipline. But why is discipline suddenly the enemy here? I mean, we've been told our whole lives that discipline is the only way to succeed.
Because discipline requires constant, active, conscious mental effort. And we now know through modern biology exactly why that fails.
Why is that?
In psychology, there is a well-documented phenomenon called ego depletion, or decision fatigue.
Okay, decision fatigue. I've heard of that.
Right. The part of your brain responsible for willpower and impulse control, the prefrontal cortex, literally consumes readily available glucose to function.
Wait, like actual physical energy?
Actual physical energy Every single time, you have to force yourself to make a good choice. Like forcing yourself to pick up a book instead of turning on the TV. You burn a measurable amount of that cognitive energy.
Oh, wow. So if I rely on discipline to practice active rest, I am forcing my prefrontal cortex to work overtime.
Exactly.
I am actively causing the very brain fatigue I'm trying to avoid. I'm draining the battery while trying to figure out how to recharge it.
That is the biological reality. When the glucose in the prefrontal cortex runs low after a long day of decision-making, your brain simply stops fighting the urge to take the path of least resistance.
And you collapse on the couch.
You collapse on the couch. This is why the instruction to build a frictionless system is a biological necessity, not just a clever life hack. A system means your environment and your schedule are designed in advance to make the task switch the path of least resistance.
Okay, so you remove the friction, so you don't have to make a choice.
Precisely.
You don't have to burn glucose deciding to read after you finish gardening. The book is already open, sitting on the armchair by the window, with a glass of water right next to it.
Right. You don't have to decide to listen to music when your body is tired. Your favorite record is already queued up, or your playlist is the default screen on your phone.
You're kind of tricking yourself into doing it.
Exactly. You don't rely on willpower to go for a walk and get physical activity. You have a standing, non-negotiable daily appointment to walk your neighbor's dog at 4 p.m.
So a system creates an inevitable flow. When you design the environment correctly, the transitions just happen naturally.
Yeah, you don't have to stand there and push the water down the river. You just dig a good riverbed, and gravity guides the water for you.
By removing the friction, you naturally become the flowing river we discussed at the beginning of the deep dive. You bypass the need for exhausting discipline entirely.
And it reframes our quote-unquote failures of willpower. It completely removes the heavy guilt we often associate with laziness.
That's so freeing.
It is. If you find yourself staring at the ceiling and gathering moss, don't blame your character or your lack of discipline. Fix your system.
I absolutely love how the source material signs off on this point.
Yeah, it's pretty bold.
It doesn't offer a gentle, passive suggestion. It ends with this incredibly energetic, almost militant call to action. It just says, no excuses, build a system, Jai Hind. It's this rallying cry to take engineering control over your own life.
It's a demand for agency.
Mm-hmm.
It tells the reader that their energy levels are not a mystery they have to suffer through, but a mechanism they can master.
So let's look at the arc of what we've uncovered today.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. We started by confronting the dangerous myth of total cessation, the societal trap that hitting retirement age means you earn the right to turn into a stagnant pond.
Right.
We unpacked the biological reality that a stagnant body doesn't preserve energy. It dismantles the energy factory and invites decay.
And from there, we explored the brilliant 1964 revelation that fatigue is highly localized. We don't need an end to work, we just need a change of work.
Like crop rotation.
Exactly. By rotating our activities, we allow exhausted neural pathways to recover while stimulating new ones, much like crop rotation restores the soil.
Which brought us to the Master Dinanath approach, balancing the physical and the mental throughout the day. If the body is tired, soothe it with music to engage the auditory cortex.
And if the mind is tired, engage it through service to downregulate the anxious rumination of the default mode network.
And finally, the realization that trying to force this dynamic lifestyle through sheer willpower is a biological dead end.
It just doesn't work.
No. We have to drop the exhausting tradition of discipline and instead design a frictionless system that guides our transitions naturally.
Which is such an empowering takeaway for you listening right now.
It really is, because whether you are looking ahead to 58, you're currently 85, or, you are only 28, you can adopt this Master Dinanath approach today.
You really can.
You don't have to wait for a retirement milestone to stop rotting on the couch, and you don't need superhuman willpower to change your evenings. You just need to set up your environment differently tonight.
It requires an upfront investment in designing your space, sure, but the dividend is a life of continuous, varied engagement.
Absolutely. As we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thing to ponder about your own localized fatigue.
Yeah, think about this.
If true rest is just a change of activity, what is a completely new, entirely unfamiliar activity you could try tonight?
Think about a part of your brain or a muscle group you haven't engaged in years. Could picking up a cheap watercolor set and painting for 20 minutes?
Or maybe trying to learn 3 basic chords on a borrowed guitar.
Exactly. Could that actually leave you feeling more cognitively recharged tomorrow morning than 8 hours of restless, anxious sleep?
Next time you feel that wave of exhaustion hit, Don't automatically head for the couch to do nothing. Picture that stagnant pond. Ask yourself, are you actually resting or are you just gathering moss? Keep the river flowing.